We have with us today Raymond Baker for a conversation with me, and I'm Charles Davidson, the editor-publisher of the Offshore Initiative. I've known Raymond since 2006, when I helped him get Global Financial Integrity off the ground, which is a think tank, although at the time we called it a program, which was ambiguous because it did a little bit of everything. And it still does a little bit of everything. And it really was the first or second, depending on how you look at it, but first organization, certainly in the United States, devoted to the decreation of offshore. We didn't talk about it back then as decreating the offshore system, but it's certainly what we were looking for and looking to do. It was perhaps a little early. It may still be a little early, but we think the idea is timely, that a lot of people can get behind this at this point. So Raymond has an interesting background because, as you can see, he's wearing a coat and tie. He's experienced, and he went to Harvard Business School. Yet, he's in favor of decreating the offshore system. So, Raymond, why don't we start with your background, and please elaborate beyond my initial question. And if we go back to when you graduated from Harvard Business School in 1960, did this global financial secrecy system that we've labeled offshore exist? And is this something that professors discussed, that students discussed?
It did not exist. Let me qualify that. I learned later that there were 3 or 4 tax havens that were in business by the early 1960s. But this whole structure that we have today was not addressed in our classes, not in finance or accounting or marketing or any of our other classes did we address this. There was one course called Business Responsibilities in the American Society, which of course we abbreviated as BRAS, and that course was essentially focused on being a responsible patriotic corporation. But that's about as far as we got into any of what now prevails as reality.
And then after you graduated, you didn't embark on a traditional career, but went off to Africa seeking adventure and perhaps fortune. And how did those experiences shape your awareness of all of this? And what happened to you in Africa?
I decided after I graduated that I wanted to get a taste of international business. So I took a job in Nigeria, working for another company for a couple of years, and then set up on my own. The early experience that exposed me to the realities that we're now dealing with was a conversation I had with the managing director of a British trading company. And this guy had been in West Africa for, I guess, 20 or 25 years. And being new to Africa, I asked him, how do you do business in Africa? And he just looked me up one side and down the other and was not the least bit forthcoming. I got the distinct impression that he didn't like Americans showing up in his ex-British colony so soon after independence. But I pressed on and I asked him, okay, well, tell me, how do you price your imported cars and building materials and textiles to sell in the Nigerian market? And he looked at me again and he said, price? Price is not a problem. I'm not trying to make a profit. I had absolutely no idea what he was talking about. I just spent 2 years at Harvard Business School learning all about how to make a profit. And here, one of the early people I talked to says, I'm not trying to make a profit. It took me a long time to figure out what was going on.
Ah, well, Raymond, why wasn't he trying to make a profit? It sounds like there was some sort of subterfuge here.
He was the Nigerian subsidiary of a British trading company. The parent company in the UK overpriced everything that it was selling to the subsidiary in Nigeria. The subsidiary was not intended to operate as a profit. It was only intended to pay its bills, so that whatever profit margin might occur was simply getting transported back to the UK within the invoice, within the price payment for the goods that were coming in. This is transfer pricing. It took me a while to understand this phenomenon.
Hmm. Well, transfer pricing is something rather important to understand in all of this. So if we take illicit financial flows generally, which in terms of offshore and the secrecy of offshore that we're against here at the Offshore Initiative, what role does transfer pricing play in this overall offshore system? How important is it, and how can we explain this as simply as possible?
It's at the heart of the system. It's the way that you make the system operate. Charles, if I could elaborate a little bit on the components of the shadow financial system, comprises tax haven, secrecy jurisdictions, disguised corporations, anonymous trust accounts, fake foundations, hybrid entities, money laundering techniques, and then holes left in the laws of our Western countries that facilitate the movement of money through this shadow financial system and ultimately into our Western economies. All of those elements of the system are dependent upon trade misinvoicing to make them work. That's at the heart of the system. That's the way you make the system function.
So, in other words, we charge one price to some sort of intermediary and then sell at another price in the country where we want to minimize our profits or taxes, whatever. Is that correct?
That is correct, and you can do it directly between two trading partners if they agree to the mispricing. That is to say, just as you have indicated, you can make the transaction flow through a middle entity, or you can make the misinvoicing work strictly between the two trading entities if they agree to the misinvoicing.
Okay. Well, so after these initial experiences in Africa, which were a significant part of your career, and you traveled and did business all over Africa. I think it wasn't just Nigeria. I mean, not in all countries, but many countries. What did this say to you about capitalism and the way capitalism was evolving, both practically and politically in the world? If we go back a number of years, and maybe you can tell us about what time frame this was also.
I spent 35 years in business all over Africa, all over the world, and I saw this process of trade misinvoicing moving literally billions and billions of dollars out of developing countries. So what do we call this? Do we call it predatory capitalism? Do we call it rogue capitalism? Whatever it is, it certainly is not capitalism designed to benefit all stakeholders. I watched, for example, Nigeria produce hundreds of billions of dollars worth of oil and transfer hundreds of billions of dollars out of the country. Nigeria today has the highest number of people living in extreme poverty of any country in the world. This is ridiculous for a country that is so wealthy in resources. But the same thing has been true of scores of other developing countries where massive amounts of money have been transferred out.
So, Raymond, then what wound up your career in Africa, and how did you get from there to the Brookings Institution and to the composition of your seminal book, Capitalism's Achilles Heel?
After 35 years in business, I knew that what I was seeing was not what was being addressed by governments, by foreign aid agencies, by the World Bank, by the International Monetary Fund, by development economists. The basic equation, how much money is going into developing countries, how much money is coming out of developing countries, what's left over for developing countries, that equation was never on the table for development economists. They were totally focused on what's going into the developing countries. I knew that this was an inadequate examination of the political economy between wealthy and poorer countries. So I segued into the Brookings Institution, did research on this, and finally came to the conclusion that the data indicates more money is going out of developing countries than is going into developing countries.
And about what ratio? Is there any notion of what the figures are?
It depends on the continent. Africa is probably somewhere between 50 and 100% more going out than is going in. Other parts of the world are different. But in our work, we have established statistically that money going out of all lower and middle income countries drives poverty and inequality in those countries.
And so then what led you to the Brookings Institution and writing Capitalism's Achilles Heel?
I decided I had to say what I had to say. I knew that we were not adequately addressing the whole of the development equation, the whole of the capitalist impact on the majority of the world's population. So I simply decided I had to say what I had to say, and spent a total of almost 10 years at Brookings before, about 8 years at Brookings before establishing Global Financial Integrity to proceed. But out of my years at Brookings came the book Capitalism's Achilles Heel.
Well, Raymond, thank you. And it's been a great pleasure having you here with us at the Offshore Initiative, and I hope we'll do this again soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. My pleasure.